This is the Middle East, a region that for centuries has been the crossroads of empires, religions, and trade. But today, it's something else entirely. It's a chessboard, a place where local militias, regional powers, and global superpowers all collide. From the shattered streets of Aleppo to the tense borders of Gaza and Lebanon.
Of Israel's military build-up on its border with Gaza becomes clearer. Troops battle ready as they prepare for a ground offensive that could begin at any moment.
The Middle East isn't just living through one war, it's trapped in overlapping struggles. And the real question is, who actually controls this region? The answer, as always, is more complicated than it first seems. To understand it, we need to rewind, because before the Arab Spring, before ISIS, before the chaos of today, there was the story of one regime that shaped modern Syria, the Ba'ath. The Ba'ath Party was born in Damascus in 1947. It sounded almost utopian at first. Arab unity, socialism, equality. Its founders, Michel Aflaq, Salah al-Din al-Bitar, and Zaki al-Arsuzi, promised a future where Arabs would rise together, free from colonial chains. But in practice, Ba'athist socialism didn't mean freedom. It meant power concentrated in the hands of the military and ultimately in the hands of one man. That man was Hafez al-Assad. In 1970, he launched what he called the corrective movement, but it was really a coup inside the party. From that moment, Syria was no longer ruled by ideas. It was ruled by Assad's iron fist. The regime survived by crushing dissent, and in 1982 the world saw just how brutal it could be. When the Muslim Brotherhood rose up in the city of Hama, Assad's forces didn't hesitate. They surrounded the city, shelled entire neighborhoods, and left tens of thousands dead. Human Rights Watch later estimated the death toll at over 25,000. Opposition wasn't just discouraged, it was annihilated. And yet, beneath this iron grip, cracks were forming. When Hafez died in 2000, his son Bashar took over. He was young, Western educated, and promised reforms. Syrians hoped he might open the country, modernize it, maybe even soften the regime. Instead, corruption grew worse. The gap between rich and poor widened. His so-called economic reforms privatized industries, but left millions unemployed. Then came disaster. Between 2006 and 2010, a severe drought scorched Syria's farmland. Crops failed, rural families abandoned their villages, and flooded into cities already strained by poverty. By the time 2011 arrived, Syria was a tinderbox. And then the spark came. A group of children in Daraa scrawled anti-regime slogans on a wall. The regime's response was arrest, torture, humiliation. Outrage swept the country. Protests erupted. At first, the people asked for reforms, but when Assad's forces opened fire, the chant changed. It was no longer about reform, it was about revolution.
There are reports that Syrian troops have opened fire on civilians in the central city of Hama.
The Arab Spring had arrived in Syria, and once again the regime responded with terror. Mass killings, arbitrary detentions, even chemical weapons like the infamous attack on Ghouta in 2013 that killed over 1,000 people in one morning. But unlike Hama in 1982, the uprising didn't collapse. It spread, and what began as protests soon became one of the deadliest wars of the 21st century. By 2012, Syria was no longer one country, it was many. The Assad regime, backed by Russia, Iran, and Hezbollah, clung to the cities. Opposition groups fractured into dozens of factions, some moderate, some radical, some little more than bandits. Kurdish fighters in the north carved out their own autonomous zones, and in 2014, ISIS surged across the desert, seizing territory the size of Britain. Syria had become a patchwork of warlords, militias, and foreign armies. The cost was catastrophic. More than 500,000 Syrians killed, over 13 million displaced, millions fleeing to Turkey, Lebanon, and Jordan, while millions more became refugees in Europe. The economy collapsed, infrastructure was obliterated, and entire cities were reduced to rubble. But in this chaos, something new also emerged, something unexpected. In northern Syria, as Assad's forces retreated, Kurdish groups stepped in. The Democratic Union Party and its militia, the YPG, declared autonomy.
The PYD has announced that it will declare a self-controlled federation in northern Syria later on Wednesday or Thursday.
They called their region Rojava. And unlike Assad's dictatorship or the Islamists' rigid theocracy, Rojava tried something different. They built a system called democratic confederalism.
We want to change the system in Syria into a democratic system.
It was grassroots, decentralized, and built on principles like gender equality and environmental sustainability. Women weren't just participants, they were leaders, fighters, decision makers. In 2014, when ISIS launched a genocidal campaign against the Yazidis in Sinjar, it was Kurdish forces that broke the siege, rescuing tens of thousands. For many, Rojava became a symbol of hope in a region drowning in blood. But not everyone saw it that way. Turkey viewed the YPG as an extension of the PKK, a group it considered terrorists. In 2019, Ankara launched Operation Peace Spring, invading northern Syria to crush Kurdish autonomy. The US, once the Kurds' strongest ally against ISIS, suddenly pulled back, leaving them exposed. Russia and Assad's regime also eyed Rojava with suspicion, unwilling to tolerate an independent experiment on their territory. Rojava's survival was always precarious, and its dream of democracy, though inspiring, stood in the way of nearly every major power in the region. Meanwhile, in Syria's northwest, another force was rising, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, or HTS. Formed in 2017 from a merger of Islamist factions, HTS quickly became the dominant power in Idlib. Its leader, Abu Muhammad al-Julani, had once fought with ISIS, but he broke away, rebranded, and tried to portray himself as more pragmatic. HTS wasn't just an armed group, it built its own governing structure, the Syrian Salvation Government. It ran schools, courts, and basic services. On paper, it looked like a state, but in reality, power remained concentrated in Julani's hands. At first, HTS enforced strict Sharia law. Over time, it softened its image, trying to convince the world it was different from ISIS. Julani even gave interviews, presenting himself in a suit instead of militia uniform, hinting at moderation. But beneath the surface, the authoritarian reality remained. Dissent was crushed. Elections were non-existent, and yet, in a region abandoned by others, HTS was the only authority left standing. By 2024, Idlib wasn't just a stronghold, it was HTS's mini-state. But Syria's war can't be understood in isolation. It's part of a much bigger story. Take Israel, for example. Since the 2006 Lebanon war, Israel has been locked in a shadow war with Hezbollah, Iran's most powerful proxy. Airstrikes on Syrian soil became routine, targeting weapons convoys, Iranian bases, and Hezbollah operatives. Israel didn't strike HTS directly, but its operations reshaped the battlefield around them. In Gaza, Israel waged repeated wars against Hamas. Each time the fighting reverberated beyond Palestine, fueling anger across the region and emboldening Islamist factions elsewhere. Iran, meanwhile, poured resources into Syria, propping up Assad with fighters from Hezbollah and its Revolutionary Guard. For Tehran, Syria was more than an ally. It was a corridor linking Iran to Lebanon, a lifeline for Hezbollah. Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states supported the opposition, seeing Assad as Iran's puppet. Turkey played its own double game, backing rebels but also invading Kurdish areas to stop Rojava. And then there were the global powers. Russia intervened in 2015 with warplanes and missiles, turning the tide for Assad. The United States backed the Kurds against ISIS, but its commitment wavered, especially under Donald Trump. Trump, true to form, was unpredictable. One moment he promised to withdraw, declaring America should stop wasting blood and treasure in the Middle East. The next, he tightened sanctions on Iran, sold weapons to Saudi Arabia, and reinforced ties with Israel. His 2019 decision to suddenly pull US troops from northern Syria left allies scrambling and adversaries celebrating. It was a reminder that in this region, foreign powers don't act out of principle. They act out of interest, and those interests shift constantly. Assad's regime, once seemingly untouchable, is now weakened like never before. With Russia distracted by its war in Ukraine, with Iran under pressure, and with Hezbollah bleeding in Lebanon, Assad's support system has cracked. In just 12 days, the regime surrendered to HTS without significant resistance. What once looked like an unshakable dictatorship crumbled almost overnight. The symbolism is staggering. A regime that survived decades of rebellion, coups, and wars collapsed not through foreign invasion, but through its own decay. Its reliance on brutality had worked for a time, but without external lifelines, its foundations collapsed like a house of cards. And into that vacuum stepped Abu Muhammad Julani. His group, once dismissed as another jihadist faction, now controls territory, governance, and the future of millions. But does Julani really control Syria? Or does anyone truly control the Middle East? Look closer, and it's clear that the answer is no. The region is still a web of overlapping struggles. Israel continues its wars in Gaza and Lebanon, and now Iran is included too. On the other hand, Iran pushes influence through militias. Turkey targets the Kurds. The US talks of withdrawal but can't fully leave. Russia clings to whatever foothold it can, and China watches and invests, hoping to expand its influence without firing a shot. The Middle East isn't controlled by one power. It's pulled in a dozen directions at once. Each war bleeds into another. Each faction's survival depends not only on local strength, but on the calculations of players far beyond its borders. And at the center of it all are ordinary people. Syrians, Palestinians, Iraqis, Yemenis, who have borne the brunt of these struggles. They've endured dictatorships, foreign interventions, jihadist terror, and endless displacement. So who really controls the Middle East? Not Julani, not even regional giants like Iran, Turkey, or Saudi Arabia, and certainly not the US or Russia, despite their military might. The truth is, no one fully does. Control here is always temporary, always fragile, always contested. The region is less a chessboard and more a storm, where every player believes they can steer the winds, but in reality, they're all caught inside it. And for the millions who live in the Middle East, the struggle isn't about geopolitics or ideology. It's about survival. It's about finding some form of stability in a region where power shifts overnight and promises from outside powers mean little. The hidden struggles of the Middle East are not just about territory or alliances. They're about the fate of people who decade after decade are trapped in battles they never chose. And unless something changes, the cycle will keep repeating over and over again.